We're actually going live from Nimandabel. I'm sitting out here with my twins and their zoo, and I will indulge a minute to introduce you to the zoo. This talk today is about SnowyMonaro Regional Council and a 4.5 million litre town drinking water tank, a big giant concrete tank up on top of a hill above houses. It was condemned, it was cracked, it was broken, and our council was told to not use it, and that if they used it, it could fail catastrophically. Anyone want to guess what happened? Oh, council used it. What happened, Andrew? It failed catastrophically, flooding lots of houses and damaging cars and all kinds of things. So let's a couple of minutes for people to find the link and jump on. But would the twins like to introduce their zoo quickly? I'm sure you all want to see the zoo, and then we're going to get into council cover-up exposed. Who's going to show me this zoo? It's a pretty cool zoo. If I can turn the camera around, it's there's a snake, and there's a bear in there and a stick as well. There are foxes playing games and a rare corroboree frog from Kosciuszko National Park. An owl. Come on, who's going to introduce me? Don't mind all our firewood. It's the middle of winter here in Australia. What? Koalas?
Yep. And some kangaroos and the deer.
Wow.
And we also have some wombats over here.
Do you?
And three platypus.
3 platypus.
And 1 rhino.
A rhino all the way at the back. And just the whole veranda is now an open air zoo. I love the snake coming out of the bark.
Also, and over here we have some lions and a giraffe and an elephant. Yep. And then we have the aquarium area with it.
An aquarium.
With a dolphin, a shark, a seahorse, and
Wow.
a whale shark.
And there's a cow eating, and a cow eating some leaves.
That's the giraffe. That's a giraffe.
Oh, that's a giraffe. Oh, okay.
Yes. Otherwise, we got 2.
And we've got an aviary.
And then we got the sloths and some birds in this place. Cockatoos,
Hello, Cocky. That's pretty cool.
You got a small owl and rainbow.
That is pretty cool, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, don't you think, fellow shoppers? Well, let's get into our chat about... Turn the camera around when it works. Council cover-up exposed. The truth behind the Snowy 1 reservoir explosion. And what you see here is a house impacted by flood, mud and damage. Car starting to get buried in mud and debris. And this is from the Community Advocates Voice, SnowyMonaro Community Advocates, of which I am a member. So what we have is that there was millions of dollars of ratepayers' funds secretly spent, and that's actually true. So what we have here is, this is Cooma North. Cooma is a small town in southern New South Wales, about an hour drive from the snow. There's a lot of small blocks. These are old snowy hydro houses that were built in the 50s, 60s and 70s as part of the Snowy scheme. And some of the blocks are actually quite small. Steep hill. That's a really steep hill. Steep all the way up here to these 2 water tanks. So Snowy 1 was the oldest tank. This one here, built in about 1958. And I'm not sure if it's Snowy 2, but whatever that one's called. This one was 4.5 million litres. It's about 45 metres diameter. And it was probably 7-8 metres high, something like that, maybe a bit more. It was massive. Now, in total, there could be about $10 million worth of damage. We don't know the final figure, but that's inclusive of the 5 or so million needed to put a reservoir back. So at the moment, that's not there. It's gone. And the site's been fenced and there's been things. So what happened is the tank exploded. It ruptured through a crack, which was in that point there, and the water just went boof, straight down the hill, straight down these roads and impacting all of these houses through here. Quite a problem. So there is the brochure. I can put the photos up probably later. And here is the broken tank. This is the roof of the tank. And there's the wall blown out, laying on the ground. Quite a big tank. That's the filling port where the water comes in and out of the tank. Flat surface, and it was a concrete ring sitting on top of a concrete slab, and the water just exploded out. And then you can see people with mud through their lounge rooms, just completely buggered their houses. Cars and trucks washed against trees. Now, there's a bit of a history to this tank, and that is covered in this information here. And we believe it was constructed or erected around 1958. 2014, the discovery of leaks, which were known about for some time. There was work undertaken by council to try and repair it. 2018, there was a known critical extreme risk and risk of catastrophic consequences if it was used, partly as a consequence is revealed in these photos here. So there's a work platform in the cage. This cage usually sits over the top. What this is here, this is the wall of the tank, and these are the reinforcing strands. So several layers of reinforcing strands. So the tank, as you can see, is a concrete wall vertically. And if you look carefully in this photo, you can see like they look like bricks or lines of bricks, but it's not. That's a channel, 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 all the way down. The channels go all the way down. You can just make out wires here. These are high tensile straining wires or stressing. They call it post-tension stressing wires. So in these channels, when they built the tank, they wrapped high tensile steel wires around and pulled them tight, and then mortar covered them. They mortared them into the tank so they couldn't move. That was a classic way of building large diameter concrete tanks, and that the steel wires, is like a fencing wire, holds the concrete together against the force of the water. And it's these very wires that the council cut with their contractors, Allen Spar Engineering, because there was a giant crack and there had been corrosion. And so they cut the wires, put clamps on each side and a tightening bolt, like a turnbuckle in the middle, and they tried to pull the two sides together to retension the tank wall. And you don't need many brain cells to guess where did the tank rupture. Exactly where they cut the reinforcing. So they were told in their engineering reports there are critical extreme risks and catastrophic consequences. There'd be death, loss of system or plant, release to the environment, public interest and regulatory interventions. They filled the tank around about the 2nd of January, and this is the 1st of January. This is the plot of the tank depth gauge. 1st of January, the tank was empty. 2nd of January, they started filling it, and they were told that they, in an emergency, could use it to 40% level. So they did fill it to 40% or 20%, 40%, they could roughly use it. And then they let it sit for a little while, Friday the 3rd, and they thought, oh yeah, well that's okay, it's not too bad. So then they filled it to 80%, which was way into the critical level, and thought, oh, well, we'll let it sit there, that's not too bad, indicating they can control its filling. And then we're on to Saturday the 4th of January 2020, and then they filled it all the way to nearly the 100%. And then it started leaking. This is leaking. This is when it was leaking really, really badly. Water would pour out, and then the level would come down, the crack would close up a bit, and it would fill up again. And then that's the catastrophic failure point right there. 9:15, Saturday night, 4th of January 2020. Now, Here's your context. 2019-2020 Christmas period was the Australian bushfires. And on the Christmas, New Year's period, we had bushfires encroaching upon the Cooma area and Nimidabel and all over the place. We had no sky, no sun. The sky was grey. Everyone was in their houses. All the tourists down the coast were ejected and sent home. It was a really trying and stressful time for everybody. The power lines were failing and catching fire because the wooden poles were burning. And our council decided to fill that tank. They didn't need to. The fire brigade didn't ask them to. The fire brigade didn't need the water. They were just getting the water out of dams and rivers. So they filled the tank knowing that they shouldn't, and it exploded. And it exploded on a night, one of the worst night of the bushfires. At 5 p.m. that day, the sky went pitch black because the fire across Kosciuszko National Park flared up so intensely and across tens and tens of thousands of hectares all at the same time. The smoke was visible from space. You can see the radar plots. The rain radars were plotting the smoke. It was that thick because of all the bark and leaves in the air give radar echoes. So we were plotting our bushfire progress using rain radars. That's how bad it was for my international viewers. It was something I'd never seen in my life. I hope never to see it again. And the sky went black at 5 p.m. And that's the night the tank exploded at 9:15. Now, the reason that nobody was personally injured or killed is because everybody was tucked up tight in their houses. Their doors were shut. Everybody had towels at the bottom of their doors rolled up to keep the smoke out. Their windows were tight. Their doors were tightly shut. And everybody was sitting inside because it was hot and stuffy and the air was acrid. You couldn't breathe it. It was awful. So a lot of the water was not able to just wash into the houses as easily as it would have been. Now, this is an Australian summer. At 9 o'clock, it's still light. People still sit outside and have a beer or a wine or a cold drink. Kids can still play in the yards. People walk their dogs as it's cooled off. And it's only, as Providence had it, that the night was so awful that everybody was tied up in their houses and shut everything tight, that nobody was out walking or sitting on their veranda, and the flood happened. So the tank burst open and 4,500 tons of water, or 4.5 million litres of water, just rushed down the hill through all the houses, washed cars away, lifted a concrete driveway up out of the ground. A concrete driveway was floated out of the ground and carried away and hit and caught by trees. And pretty scary. There was an old lady, 90-something years old, at the top of the hill, one of the first houses hit, who was attended to by an ambulance. And in our research, the advocates and the ratepayers associations, we've researched this very strongly. There is no record of any ambulance attending. In fact, 2 ambulances attended, but there's no record of it. There's no record of any injury, apparently. There's been no investigation by any government agency. None. None. And it's unbelievable to think that the government wouldn't be interested in investigating this. But I'm here to tell you that's factually the truth. Nobody has investigated this matter. Now, the problem is compounded because there was asbestos dumped under houses and in people's yards as a consequence of the flood. And that issue was raised very early in the matter. And there's a letter I have dated 23rd of January 2020 from the council to the resident, not even a personalised letter, just the resident, indicating that council has nearly completed the work that it can undertake in the area. Council's been working with insurers to progress the matter. Sidebar, the insurers didn't insure it because it wasn't an insurable event because the tank was condemned. FYI. And they say, we understand that it's difficult for those who are waiting on a determination as to council's position on the matter. There's no position to determine. Council's tank, council filled it. They were told not to fill it. It's council's fault. Full stop. End of. Many people are starting to look at impacts and they are wanting to claim that are not covered by their insurance, of course, such as landscaping. That's important because what happened in the days after, council got in there with bobcats and excavators and dug up people's yards and ripped out their gardens and pulled out their fences because the area looked like a war zone. But there was asbestos everywhere, asbestos fibro. Council goes on in their letter to say asbestos needed to be considered as part of the cleanup work due to the age of the buildings in the area. Council has ensured that staff trained in asbestos management were on site and monitoring any work Council has been undertaking. Any materials that may have been loose asbestos were treated as asbestos and appropriately removed. But these trained people weren't complying with law. They weren't wearing coverall suits. They weren't wearing dust masks. They were exposed to asbestos because council didn't care. And it's not that they didn't tell them. They were looking for asbestos, but they weren't wearing any PPE, which is insane. And this is now where council engaged in what's called misdirection, misinformation. This is their letter, we have heard claims that asbestos was washed into yards from council's water main pipes. After hearing of this claim, council rechecked the pipe network and confirmed there is no damage to the pipes. The one pipe that was partly exposed is not of a type that contains asbestos. There was nothing about the pipes. It was the asbestos cladding. It was the asbestos sheet fragments about this big often, like 4 inches square or 10 centimetres square or 20 centimetres square. The asbestos packing that we use when you have a house that's built on piers or pylons or concrete blocks. You quite often use sheets of fibre cement or asbestos cement to level the bearers off in the house. Houses were shifted off their foundations and those asbestos packing sheets were washed away from uphill houses into downhill houses. Houses that were made with fibro walls, and pretty much through the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, all houses in Australia built to code had their laundries and their bathrooms built with asbestos cement or fibre cement sheeting, and that's what you glue your tiles to for waterproofing. And when houses are constructed, you use a thing called a sheet cutter, an asbestos sheet cutter. And when it cuts out a slot about 5 millimetres wide and about 4 inches long. And that's how you cut your fibre sheet. And those slots quite often just get thrown under the house, as does the broken pieces of asbestos. When the sparkies come, the electricians and the plumbers, and they knock holes in the asbestos to put your power points in, they just smack a hole through with a hammer and cut it out with a knife. And all that shit falls down through the wall or gets thrown under the house. A lot of houses had asbestos sheeting around the base of their house to enclose the elevated house. And that was smashed by the water and broken and carried away from uphill houses into downhill houses. And in that photo, as I showed you, where the tanks were located, turn the camera around, where the tanks were located, can you help out the sunlight? Where the tanks were located, this is all a walking reserve, and you can see track, 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 track. These are car tracks. You can drive your car through those areas. And people had dumped rubbish, including construction and demolition rubbish or asbestos and bathroom renovations. There is still stuff there now that has been illegally dumped, and that got washed into the houses. So council employed a classic misdirection tactic to say, oh, well, it could have been asbestos water pipes that we checked and it wasn't. And that's a lie. They know exactly what it was. And they lied to the residents. And they have lied at all times since. Now, let's fast forward to last night. Exactly 4.5 years to the day, July the 4th, Australian time, last night, we had a public meeting in Cooma. It was well attended. And we had Rory Markham from Adero Law travel down from Canberra to address us and offer his firm's legal assistance to right the wrongs in this matter. Council has been requested to address the asbestos issue, and they have refused. I have personally observed asbestos fragments under people's houses in the flood debris that still remains under the houses. Factual point. Council was asked to remove the accumulated flood debris from under houses, and they said they were not able to because they were confined spaces potentially contaminated with asbestos. It's like mind blown. So council is happy for children. When I was a kid, we played under our house, for children to play under the houses, for homeowners to store things. Some people store their lawnmowers under their houses, and timber and pipes and camping equipment, all kinds of things. So council's happy for people to remain exposed to the asbestos that council moved and put there, but they won't go and clean it up because they're scared of the asbestos. Part of the irony of introducing you to my children's zoo. I have 5 children and the 2 7-year-old twins that introduce you to their zoo. They play and they drag shit out. I don't let them play under our house under any circumstance because it's an old 1948 house. But I would have played under there as a kid because we didn't know any better, but I do. So they play outside of the envelope of the house. But they can play in the garden, and they might come across fragments of asbestos, which we do from time to time. It's just how we build our houses in Australia with this shit, and we haven't got rid of it yet. But it's important that we respect our children and we respect our families' children in our town, which our council does not. It does not. And we are going to right that wrong. So Rory Markham, Adero Law out of Canberra, engaged from the community and from the SnowyMonaro Community Advocates and the SnowyMonaro Ratepayers and Residents Association. He's going to help us seek all of the relevant documentation from the council as to what they knew and know, which highlights what they should have done and haven't have done with respect to the asbestos risk. Where we take this is that the council will be encouraged to solve the problem by conducting a free, so they can't charge for this because it's their problem, a free assessment of every impacted property from the flood to check it for remnant asbestos and asbestos contamination along with flood debris to ensure that there is no flood debris and that there is no asbestos remaining. Where asbestos is then identified, or the risk of asbestos and flood debris is identified, it shall be removed completely, properly, lawfully and cleanly by authorised and qualified competent contractors, not council staff, because they're incompetent. And then council will provide property owners, again, without cost and without obligation, but as a must, a clearance certificate clearing the property from asbestos contamination. And that will be registered on the property file. And this is why it's important. When you want to sell a property, you can't sell an asbestos contaminated property and lie about it. It is known that these properties are at risk of contamination, and that has therefore affected property values. That may be a compensable issue. That's a later point of analysis for any property owner to analyse. Some properties have been sold. Some properties are rented and used by tenants as they come and go, and some of them haven't ever been aware. There is another element to this which also comes, and this is out of Occupational Health Law, is that where there is a known exposure to asbestos, those people exposed must be checked by a doctor, and they must do, or should do, a lung volume test by the doctor and potentially a chest x-ray. And those things filed. It's like a snapshot of your health at point or close to point of exposure. And the council's going to have to provide that as well, free of cost to these people. If anybody develops an asbestos-related disease in future years, they have a reference point to go back to say, well, I was potentially, or I was exposed to asbestos in those weeks around January 2020 as a consequence of council's actions. council retains liability for that forever. These are the things that must be done and will be done. And as a consequence of the public meeting last night, I thank everybody who attended. We did not video that meeting last night, nor did we take photographs of that meeting last night. SnowyMonaro Regional Council is one of the most nasty, corrupt and vindictive councils you would ever meet. And out of the interest of these people who have suffered for so long, we will not reveal their identities. It's not hard to work out who they are, but individually we will not reveal their identities so they cannot be targeted by the monsters in this council to try and pressure them. This is now not something that the council can shut down. The council must act at law and in the community interest to solve this problem that they created. And you have my word that this will happen. And not just my word, lots of people's word. Enough is enough, SnowyMonaro Council. You cannot make people live in an asbestos contaminated environment that you contaminated and not do anything about it. This is accountability 101. And anybody that gets approached or intimidated by any of the shitty current councillors or the executive, let me know. And I will jump on it. And it will be jumped on legally and swiftly. We have seen too much intimidation of people by this council to try and make people be quiet and not talk about it. With regard to that, there have been confidential settlements in respect of these properties receiving damages. And everybody was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement before they got their money by the council. That is unlawful. That is not moral. That is not proper. And those non-disclosure agreements are vitiated by fraud, so they have no weight. So don't think anybody tells you, well, you signed a non-disclosure and you signed a full deed of release to the council against any future claims and liabilities. They are vitiated by fraud. They are null and void. They are void ab initio. They are worthless. And to the council's eternal shame that they forced residents, renters and landholders to sign non-disclosures and deeds of release, whilst all the while knowing that asbestos remained on their properties and that shit from the flood is still there. That is unconscionable. That is criminal. And we will get to the bottom of it. So, slick experience. Did it cause you to have tooth decay? I don't have any tooth decay. I don't have a single filling. As a 51-year-old man, I do not have a single filling. That was a push bike accident when I was 12. I did a jump and I landed on my face on a bitumen road and the tooth came out. And I put the tooth back in and it lasted for about 35 years. It came out about 5 years ago, something like that. So anyone that's troubled by my missing front tooth, remember, I'm the one that lives quite happily with a missing front tooth. It's my issue, not yours. And I invite you to build a bridge and get the fuck over it. I don't even know why you want to pick on it. Next, you're going to say, do I enjoy being bald? It's not a matter of whether I enjoy it. I don't have a choice. My grandfather was bald. My dad wasn't. And is it the blessings of the Lord that my sons will escape baldness, but their sons won't? So I might think I'm a bit harsh sometimes and I can be a bit narky. There's a lot going on and a lot of people attack me constantly because they do not want me to assist the community with these things. So happy to engage, happy to be accountable and answer questions. And who was infected? It's not a matter of who was infected. It was who was affected. Anybody that lived in that area. And by extension, our whole shire was affected because our council has recently published the 24-25 financial year budget. And they have said that they will no longer maintain most of our rural roads because they don't have any money, because they secretly spent $3 million secretly compensating people who were injured by a water tank flood. By using a water tank they were told not to use. That's why they're not able to maintain our roads. That's why Everybody in our shire was affected, and that's why everybody was invited to attend the meeting, to participate. This is not about dollar compensation. This is about making it right and making it safe for people to continue to live in those homes. And it's about getting better management in our council so they don't blow up another water tank. That's what's important, and that's what this is about. So my strong thank you and commendation to, believe it or not, Peter Anderson from the SnowyMonaro Community Advocates, and yes, advocates, plural, because I'm an advocate as well. I'll stand with Peter Anderson. I admire his tenacity and his strong-minded approach to this to help get us to this point. His research, his fact-checking is extraordinary. And he doesn't live there. He just lives in the town, but he hates injustice. And he has been pilloried by the council to try and shut him down, and it's wrong, as they have tried to do to me. It is wrong. We're not going to allow that to continue. Thank you to Matt Nolte, part of the Residents and Ratepayers Association, for his research. Very detailed research, because he is an ex-AFP detective researcher. He has that skill. Matt took up from what Peter and I had found and found more. And we have presented this information to members of Parliament. It's aware all the way to the top of our government. The Governor-General, the Governor of New South Wales, the Premier, the opposition leaders, the environment ministers, the WorkSafe ministers. It's been brought up in budget estimates. There's been questions on this. The cover-up is acknowledged and is in our official record called Hansard, the official document record of the goings-on of our Parliament. This matter is in all of it, and it is in all of their knowledge, and not one of them has been able to solve the problem or direct our council to do its job. Thank you to Mark Banasiak. Unfortunately, he was an apology last night. Mark Banasiak is a Shooters, Farmers, Fishers parliamentarian in the upper house of our state parliament. He has asked questions and tried to attain accountability and answers. He's helped us get some of the information, and we thank Mark for his persistence as well. That's the sad story of the Cooma water tank explosion. Let's make sure that it's not a sad ending. Thank you for watching along. Please share the video around. This is the beginning of the journey. There's another one of these videos coming shortly, because I'm about to launch a class action against the council for fraudulent rates, fees and charges, which affect all of the ratepayers in our shire and other shires. I'll save that for a second one of these conversations. I don't know who you are to Slick Experience. I quite get, like, I think you're just being a bit of a troll, mate. So I'm not even going to give you any more airtime. Hayden says, we are lucky in Bundaberg, Queensland. We just took back our council from dodgy previous mayor. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. And talking of dodgy previous mayors, so last night we had our meeting. I'll finish on this. We had our meeting in the Cooma Servicemen's Club, quite a large club. Quite a lot of people come for the dinner. There's pokies and there's bingos and meat raffles and, yeah, I don't know what else. We had the big meeting room booked to host our meeting. One councillor from what we call the Group A, the people that promised to do an audit and promised to fix everything, who then did nothing. Tricia Hopkins came along. So thank you to Tricia for coming. I mean, you only come so you could probably work out who was there and what was said. But thank you for coming. Luke Williamson, our actual proper councillor, came. He's an economist. He's been working with us to try to get these problems resolved, and he's been stymied and stonewalled everywhere. So thank you to Luke for coming. A big shout out goes to Narelle Davis. Narelle Davis is a former mayor She is well aware of this. She received 200 and something letters, I think it was, from the community asking for assistance and answers. Narelle Davis sat outside in the bistro and had dinner. So people are exposed to asbestos. Narelle is a nurse. She's an RN, a registered nurse, worked in the health and hospital system for her whole career. And she sat outside, didn't give a shit. She had dinner, wouldn't even come into the community meeting where the community needs help. This same woman, Narelle Davis, is standing for re-election, which is the biggest insult that you could give Narelle. Narelle is a shit human, and she should be forced to eat a plate of asbestos. How dare you, Narelle? It's awful what you represent and what you stand for. This is accountability. A lot of other councillors obviously weren't able to make it because everyone's busy, and we live in a really big shire. It takes up to 2 hours to drive to Cooma from some of the shire areas. We, as I said, we didn't live stream it, we didn't record it. We do not want people to be targeted by the council, and so that's the reason. We will protect our residents. We will protect our people. We stand together. We stand stronger together. We are stronger together. Please share this around. Follow my channel, of course, because I've got more information coming. You're all going to want to hear about the rates class action that's coming. This council is going to have a whole shit ton of accountability, and it ain't going to stop until we turn that ship around. And like my mate Hayden said, get rid of the old mayors, put in some good ones. I also note for the record that the current mayor didn't turn up last night because he is the quintessential coward. It's a shame. It's a shame. We will fix this situation and we will turn it around. Sincere thanks to Rory Markham travelling down from Canberra. It's an hour and a half each way to present to us and to assist our community. It's great, great news. And we look forward to a better future for everybody. Thank you. Over and out. And where's the stop button? I haven't done too many YouTube lives. Where is it?